Water, milk and tea, the three essential elements to my favourite brew. And the Treasury's policy Venn diagram talks us through the three essential elements of excellent policy. In this Policy Skills micro-teaching session, I'm going to introduce you to the Treasury's Venn diagram, show you how it explains what excellent policy looks like, and how it can help you think about your role as a policy maker. I hope you find it useful. This is the Treasury's Venn diagram. The policy Venn diagram is one of the really key ideas in policy making, and it tells us about how to make excellent policy. Excellent policy is what happens when these three things come together. So let's explore the three elements of the Venn diagram. The first is politics. That's to do with the power, how decisions get made, very often actually politicians, but not always. The second element is about delivery, how change happens in the real world. This is where we need to consider the front line, the capacity to deliver, and our implementation plans. And finally, evidence, use of experts, thinking about two critical questions. What is the problem and what is the solution? And how do we understand and test those two questions? And these three things working together are really critical for excellent policy. So doing one thing well is really easy, and it misses the point. It's really easy to just do the politics well, to say yes, minister, to give whatever the person in power wants exactly on a plate without bothering them with the other difficult considerations. Many academics find doing evidence fairly easy, doing research relatively simple, and write endless reports where the conclusion is that what we need here is more research. But unless the evidence links to the other two elements, nothing changes. And equally, many people on the front line might have ideas about how to do things better. And while it's perfectly right and perfectly useful for those people to make kind of small, practical day-to-day changes, big systems policy changes require these ideas to come out of the delivery space, to be backed by evidence and to get political voice. We can also think about when one thing is missing, how your policies will fail. So, for example, if evidence is missing, but politics and delivery are in place, then what happens very often is the wrong thing gets done. A good idea gets followed through, but we don't have the evidence to test whether it's actually the right thing or the most cost-effective thing, or whether it will have the best impact. If you miss out the politics element, of course, what happens is actually a decision either never gets made, or the decision that does get made lacks legitimacy. And most crucially of all, you can have experts and politicians agreeing a policy, but if it misses out consideration of delivery, then the plan simply won't survive contact with the real world. You get a lot of controversy, not a lot of impact, and nothing really changes at all. And when we think about the role of the policymaker, we can see that the role of the policymaker, or the policy facilitator, as we sometimes talk about, is actually holding these three things together, not about doing them each independently necessarily, but looking at how these three things come together and hold together and negotiate that space between the elements. And thinking about where your policy starts can give you an important clue to your role in the process. So if your policy has started in the political space, at the idea of a minister or a politician or somebody in power, then your role as a policymaker is to think about how to bring in the research or commission the evidence, and think about how to engage with the delivery aspect. Sometimes good ideas, like we say, bubble up from the ground or come from the front line. And if as a policymaker you're engaging with those and aware of those, then again you need to think, how do we link that into the research? How do we commission the evidence base? And how do we convince the political or power brain to find space to entertain this idea, to turn it into something that works? And finally, if you are working in the evidence space, Then understanding the skills about how to influence those in positions of power and how to translate your evidence into something that will work on the ground is a really, really crucial policy skill. So in summary, this policy Venn diagram actually reminds us of these three critical things that need to be considered at every stage of the policy process. And in a separate policy skills micro lesson, I talk through these four stages of the policy process. And now you can see how the Venn diagram works on top of that to help us remember the things we need to consider. In summary, the policy Venn diagram is a really useful tool, and it helps policymakers consider these three critical elements that need to come together so that we can make excellent policy. Thank you for watching that policy skills micro teaching session on the policy Venn diagram. You can find more in my policy skills series on my website, and find me on Twitter or LinkedIn if you want to ask any questions.